Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm talking about the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up where last week's episode left off, obviously the Zephyr ended up destroying Insight, but obviously it puts, the Zephyr out and open, so now the Chronicons know exactly where they are. At the same time, obviously, Coulson and May were captured. It's a whole conversation of like, all right, you're saboteurs, saying there's aliens here stealing people's faces, yada yada yada. And then he looks at May, he's like, oh, that's not and she's like, yeah, that's not my name, and I'm not an HR lady. And then Coulson, I think he kind of figured it out with the whole bombs and everything. But nevertheless, then they get like they're being questioned by Stoner and like, you need to let us, because basically the Zephyr was being attacked because the lighthouse knows where they were. They were going to anyway, but the system automatically did everything itself, like firing missiles at it already. Obviously, it's not what Stoner wanted, but the fact is it went down like that anyway. So luckily the Zephyr came through, but it still came through with massive damage. So it's a situation of, okay, so now because of that, this whole situation gets worse and worse, because it's like, because the ship is damaged, it now puts them in a position where they, if they jump again, it will most likely only part of the ship will actually get teleported. The other will basically get destroyed from the jump. So gonna have to fix that immediately. So many things going down at one time. Obviously, Mack and Yoyo having to go save Mack and Yoyo going to save his parents. I mean, there's also, we quickly jump over it, but eventually it's going to circle back around. The fact is, Deke killed Malik. It's like, that wasn't the orders, but for Mack, it's like, I got too much to deal with right now to be dealing with that. So, and I even thought it was kind of adorable, like Mack being like, oh yeah, no, not the situation I thought you'd be meeting my parents under. And it's like, oh, it's so interesting because it's like, yeah, it's such a very unique situation. But nevertheless. What I also like, though, is like, obviously, once again, this empath ability that May has, because she has no emotion, she can feel other people's emotions, come in handy, because the moment that lady touched him, May was like, oh, she's a Chronicon. What? It's like, and I like Coulson being like, no, she has emotions. It's like, yeah, but I felt nothing from her, exactly how I do from you. And for him, it's like, so she's the same. It's like, we're not the same. And he's like, and I like that being an element of the episode. He constantly has to stress that I'm nothing like them. And it's like, basically, for him, and he was like, I don't appreciate your attitude. And she's like, I don't have an attitude. He's like, exactly, that's my point. She's like, so my attitude is that I don't have an attitude? He's like, yes. And I was like, there was some sassiness going back and forth. And he's like, basically, you might not be able to feel, but the fact of the matter is, I want to, because he's like, I never asked to be brought back, but here I am, and it's the very complicated situation. Because at the very least, normally he'd be able to kind of, go to May about, how to feel about everything. Like, May is someone that he can always lean on, and so for him, it's a thing of like, he kind of lost that, like, person he can lean on. And he's like, I need to know what you're thinking. She's like, all right, you want to know what I think? That basically, she's like, I've cried enough tears almost. Like, basically, it's like, I've mourned you too many times. I'm done mourning you. Like, because it's too much having to mourn someone multiple times in your life. Because I don't know if I don't even think, we never actually got to see that within the show. Because obviously, we know May and Coulson go back. But, like, when he died, like, during Avengers, like, I don't know how May took that news, or maybe maybe it was just kind of, it was a rumor that was quickly squashed because Fury, like, squashed it immediately, like, no, he's still alive. I'm curious, like, how was that really handled, how she felt about that, but nevertheless, it's like, well, he died because of the whole Ghost Rider deal, and then there's the whole thing of, like, you thought you got him back last season, because you're thinking, like, oh, he's Sarge and everything, but Sarge turned out not to be him, so it's like, you thought he came back, but he was dead again, and now he's back again, so it's like, you had your heart broken about this person you care about dying over and over again. It just, and I even like Coulson actually, because basically she's calling him like a decoy copy and stuff like that. He's like, all right, basically we're making progress. He's like, so at least I know how you're feeling, or are you just learning how to, or did you actually get your emotions back, or are you just kind of copying how I'm feeling? And I thought that was interesting, because it's like, even though is that because like I feel like even a logical standpoint, like it's so because she's in such a unique position because it's like, is she really just being like, is that just how she's thinking? Because I feel like there is emotion behind that, even though she might not necessarily have any herself. So it's like maybe some of it is coming back in that moment. But then it's like it clicks in Coulson's head. That's why she was able to kind of pretend to be human. They learned from me because I'm not as stiff, as a human. I actually look like a human. I emote. So for him, it's like they copied him, and now they've learned how to copy, humans. They're not just copying, they're stealing their faces. They're literally stealing their personalities, their memories to make them more human. So, Stoner was in the process of being like having his face taken, but then May and Coulson showed up to save him. So all the while that's happening, Mack and Yoyo end up meeting his parents, and I love he hugs his mom. She's almost like, whoa, who the hell are you, stranger, just randomly hugging me? He's like, sorry. He's like, this is my girlfriend, and he's like, and she's like, I don't think these strangers care. And it's like, yeah, sorry about my partner. He's just very happy to save you. So I was like, oh, that's actually kind of like super adorable. And then he's promising to kind of get them out of there. And I do like that as you watch the episode, you can definitely see where Mack, like who Mack is. You can see like, oh, where he got it from when it comes to his dad, like especially because they're trying to get the door open and everything. And like he's like, oh, you do this, and then Mack's dad was like, oh my god, yeah, maybe if we do this and do that. So it's like you get where like his engineer side of his side of him kind of comes from. You see it within his dad. So I was like, that was kind of neat. And even being, the whole thing between Yoyo and Mack, her being like, oh yeah, I call him my turtle man, and it's like, oh, because he moves, he's very slow, and then I forgot what the exact wording she was saying, but basically like he's slow to do stuff, and then his dad is like, well, slow and steady wins the race. So it's like even more aspects of like, okay, so you understand why Mack is kind of slow in that department of just like obviously like why it took him so long to finally get things started between him and Yoyo and everything. So also I thought it was kind of interesting, just a little tangent. I thought it was interesting because he's like, oh yeah, this is my girlfriend, Yoyo. I'm like, have they ever defined a relationship before? I don't know too many. I feel like on the top of my head, I feel like I never hear that too much during TV shows. Like, oh, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend. Maybe fiance or husband or wife, sure. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. Like, even in this show, because I don't know if May and Coulson ever defined their relationship as, oh yeah, May's my girlfriend or Coulson's my boyfriend. I know it's so stupid, but it's just like, it's just interesting that if I feel like I've never heard Mack be like, oh yeah, this is my girlfriend Yoyo. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Regardless, like I said, just a little tangent. But while all that's happening, there's a whole situation with obviously like trying to fix the ship and everything, but Simmons is like, something is not right. I'm not remembering what I'm supposed to remember. So Enoch's trying to work on her, but then you have Deke coming across the scene being like, whoa, like he's bad. Like I knocked him out because he's bad, but it turns out like you don't know what's going on. So it turns out we finally get an explanation. We still don't got the full scope of everything, I feel like, but basically there's the device that Gemma has in her. It seems like it's something specific she made. Basically, it's a memory dampener because basically she knows where Fitz is, and Fitz is in a position where he's feeding them information, but if his whereabouts are ever found, he's exposed. So it's like if they ever Chronocoms ever find him, he's dead. So she can be she can't even be the one that. The reason why she doesn't tell the others where Fitz is because even she doesn't know. She does, but that's actually the problem because she's starting to remember the things she's not supposed to remember and forgetting the things she's supposed to remember. So that's what So that was interesting. Like this whole thing has a perfect balance to it. Like she's kind of shouldering like this weight on her own. Like the fact of the matter is she's not even allowed to know where the person she loves and cares about most is, because that information is too dangerous for anyone to know, So I just thought that was kind of interesting. So Deke and they end up waking Enoch up, and it's like okay, and it's like he's like having to give an apology and stuff like that because she's like, yeah, I'm sorry because you are part of the family, and Enoch's like, well, that's the highest compliment anyone can give. Apology accepted. And I was like, oh, that's sweet, because it's like, yeah, because it's just like he's best buds with your grandfather, so it's like he is kind of. I wonder which way he means that too. Does he mean as part of the family, as in part of Fitz and Gemma's family or specifically just the S.H.I.E.L.D. family. Probably it could be end up being layers to that and being both of them. So, with that all being said and done, there was also the situation with Coulson going inside of the ship, the Chronocom's ship, and what was interesting though is he ends up meeting with their predictor S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought that was like an interesting back and forth. And she's like, "Oh, I'm a predictor," and she says some stuff, and he's like, "Oh, a predictor and a poet," and like just a little like a little sassy, like sarcastic, like back and forth between them. I was like, "Oh man, I really like that." But once again, trying to understand like why they're doing what they're doing. So it comes down to the fact of the matter is humans have a very short life expectancy. The fact of the matter is, humans do everything they can out of fear of death of themselves as well as the people they care about. And it's like, we as a Chronocoms, we live for a long time. So and once again, in their mind, it's just kind of like, because like the whole conversation is like, oh, what are you trying to accomplish? It's like, oh, just trying to save our species, which is like, he's like, hey, what's the difference? It's like, hey, that's commonality. It's like, hey, humans and Chronocoms, we have that exact situation in part. We both want to save our species. And but Sybil was even being like, you're not necessarily human. And he's like, yeah, still trying to figure that out, because it's like because she was like, oh, you're like us, and he's like, I keep having to explain that to people today. I'm not like you, but I'm still figuring out. I mean, once again, he's an LMD, but he is an LMD cross Chronocom, so it's a little bit different. And even then, he still has the memories of Coulson. He has the feelings of Coulson. So it's a combination of human, probably a third human, a third Chronocom, a third LMD. Is it really that percentage? No, but because there's really no human there, but there's human aspects as well. Like I said, his memories and his emotions. But regardless. And I just thought it was interesting because for him, it's like you kind of basically underestimate. There's things you've gotten wrong about humans. Like the fact of the matter is, for them, it's sacrifice. The fact of the matter is, because humans live such a short amount of time, because humans can die, it makes sacrifice all that worthwhile. Like in the sense that, like, it makes that sacrifice mean something. It carries, weight. And the fact of the matter is, when it's all said and done, that heart and that mind that makes up a human, like, it isn't something that just can be so easily calculated, essentially. And so it becomes a situation of like, and she's like, oh, you got another, she's like, you said I got a third thing wrong about humans, and what was it? He was like, you got me wrong. The fact of the matter is, I haven't feared death in a long, long time. He's like, dying's kind of my superpower. Which is actually super sad when you hear that in the grand scheme of things. It's like, but once again, this is a man who's died and come back so many times, So, and at the moment, I was like, does that mean what you think? I think it means, and so it is. So it seems like he's planning on blowing up the ship, which he sets off the explosion. She's like, I hope you're right, May. Part of me is curious, and I hope this doesn't end up happening. I hope it doesn't end up being a situation where like the Chronocoms somehow survived and they managed to get Coulson's body, whatever remained of it, and ends up, turning him against the team. I hope that doesn't end up being, the case in the long run, but, who knows. And at the same time, there's a whole situation with Daisy and Daniel. Obviously, Nathaniel being the one that captured him, and obviously he knows a lot. He knows that Daisy's an Inhuman. And obviously, Reinhardt and Whitehall got brought up in conversation. And so it's a thing of, like, once again, him trying to take... She's like... She even explains, she's like, this ain't a super soldier serum. This is kind of in my DNA. So, it's not going to be that transferable. But he's like, I'm going to try anyway. He's like, I got a lot of money. So, that could, give a lot away. And so it's interesting because... I mean, maybe they brought him up in the past. I feel like he's... I mean, because obviously we've gotten to know Gideon. Gideon's the Malik we've come to know the most over the course of the series. But it's like, I don't know if we ever really heard anything about his brother Nathaniel. Maybe, maybe not. But it's maybe this also kind of shows you, like, how twisted he can be. Because it seems like he says, like, he had very little to do with the family business of Hydra. He's like, yeah, worshipping a space octopus, which is like... You have no idea because of the whole the hive situation. It's like you literally have no idea like how much there is to that, But nevertheless, it is a situation where it's like I think because he's alive now, like you realize, like probably like Gideon's bad, his brother's just as bad. I mean, it's hard to say nurture versus nature thing, but it's like it's a thing of because he was no longer around, you never got a chance to see how evil potentially he could have been. But for him, it's like the only thing that interested him was this aspect of it because Daisy's powers. It's like you showed me something I found interesting. So for him, this isn't necessarily like a Hydra thing. This is more so a him thing. So I think that kind of speaks volumes, you know, in its own right. But obviously, like he brings Daisy back and she's bleeding, like because apparently like he took a whole bunch of blood and spinal fluid from her. And the moment seeing that happen, I was like, it made me immediately think like it's once again I brought up the fact of the matter is like all that like is very similar to like her mom. I mean, it's like her mom was experimented on because of this whole Hydra situation, and I'm like, that's depressing to see that. It's like it's sad. It's almost like history's repeating itself. I mean, let's not literally forget her mom was literally sliced and diced. I mean, it's only because of her powers that she was literally able to put herself back together. But it's well, was it that plus Daisy's dad? I don't remember. Like it's been a while. Because once again, that was like season 2 stuff, so it's been a long while. But if I remember correctly, it was because of her powers that she was able to put herself back together. Was it specifically a combination of that and Daisy's dad? Regardless, it was. But like I said, it's kind of sad to almost see that situation come about like that. And Daniel being there to kind of comfort her, to tell her like, hey, you need to, he talked about someone like from his time in the military, like when his leg got messed up. And he was like, this guy named Mike was there for me the entire way. He's reminding me, telling me over and over again, you're going to get home. We're going home. We're going home. Like keeping him kind of being by his bedside, when he's recovering and telling him that over and over again. Sadly, that wasn't true for Mike, but Daniel was like, I'm going to be that person right here now for you. So you gotta have more fight in you. And Daisy kind of opens her hand and there's a piece of glass. He's like, it looks like you got plenty of fight in you. And luckily Daniel got her out of there. And then we see Nathaniel, and it seems like he did transfer some of her powers, but he can't control it, and it's taking its toll on him. And then obviously, like, part of, where they're at ends up falling on him. Now, is he necessarily dead? Who knows? Because Sybil herself had said, like, there's a 22% chance of it being successful. And part of me was wondering, like, well, it seems, at least for now, it does seem like the Chronicoms are dealt with, potentially. I mean, those are like the hunters, those, the main one we were dealing with, he's gone. But who's to say there aren't still others potentially scattered throughout, Well, because like the fact of the matter is that was like a digital space, so Sybil's still out there. So that was probably like the hunters and all that, right? That was their hunters and stuff like that. Their main hub are still out there, so it's not like the Chromocoms are 100% dealt with. So because obviously they end up jumping at the end of the episode. Like I said, I'll get to that soon enough. But like I said, I'm curious, is that going to still be an angle? Like maybe he just straight up is gone. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with the whole potential Nathaniel situation. Then there's the same thing of like obviously like May, I love that moment between May and Stoner where he was kind of like, basically offering her a drink and stuff like that later on. And I thought that was so her being like, oh God, what was it? It's like because like you kind of don't, what would, that'd be kind of issue with HR. He's like, well, technically you're a saboteur, so you don't work under me. She's like, actually, I'm level 7, so you actually work for me. And so he was like, oh, yes. And she's like, create a cover story. And he's like, yes, ma'am. And then she touched him. And it's almost like this moment of like her going, ugh. Like, I guess she felt the sexual tension that he literally had for her. And he's like, oh, this is going to be quite the report. I'm like, I love that. That was just, because it's like, hey, thank you for saving my skin. And that's literal. So there's that. But the whole thing is like, well, where's Coulson? It's like, he's gone. But she's like, he'll come back. He always does, So it's like, part of me is like, you said all that, but there is a part of you that's like, no, he'll come back. Like, there's still that part of you that's worried about it. And then, Mack and his dad and everything. And it's like, oh, they're geeking out about the ship and everything. And it's like, his mom's telling Yo-Yo about her kids. It's like, how they kind of appease that? It's like ATVs. And so it's like a very heartwarming moment. And then, like, he touches May and then May looks, I was like, oh, don't tell. Because there was a moment where you see, like, his sleeve, he gets hurt and then his sleeve is rolled. And I'm like, oh, the fact is, I was like, oh, if he's one, his Mack's mom definitely is one as well. Because that means, that definitely means because she knows, she has to know, so she has to be one as well. And May brings that up, and Mackie's like, no, she's like, I literally know how you feel right now, but you need to, and there's a part of you that knows. So he's like, I need to see your sleeve. And he's like, okay. And then ends up revealing it, so both of them end up being Chromagons, and it's like, having to kill both of them, because now it's like his parents have been dead for a while. I mean, it'll impact Mack and his brother, but it's like, I mean, once again, that also depends on how the time travel rules work in this, because once again, these are not in-game rules where it's like, oh, an alternate time. Well, it technically is, like, they're not going to go back to their time where everything is unaffected. Potentially, not unless that ends up being the route that they go down, but it doesn't seem like it, because that's the whole point of time traveling. So it is a thing of, like, most likely when they go back to, it's going to be a world where it's like, oh, my parents died, like me and my brother didn't have them growing up, so it's like things weren't supposed to be this way, but it's like having to kill, like, it's just like to know your parents are going, especially getting rid of these people who had the face of your parents. Once again, it's kind of interesting timing, not necessarily timing, it's just like, well, the 100 airs on the same night as well, and that was something like Clark had to deal with last season. Her mom not being her mom, and that spoilers for last season of the 100 if you're not caught up. But that just kind of ended up floating in my mind. I was like, that sucks. So Matt's got to deal with that. There's the fact is that Deke has to keep the secret. I'm curious why he doesn't want anyone to know. I guess it's because of, like, if people knew she knew where Fitz was, and all it took was this device, maybe people would interfere with it or something like that, or it put them in danger specifically because she knows what she knows. Like, so if they can keep this under wraps and not too many people knowing, it's like it's a heavy burden to know. Because I guess it also means like no one knows where Fitz is right now technically, so it's like that's kind of a heavy burden to carry, because everyone else is like, oh, like, eventually when it's all said and done, we'll know where Fitz is, but there's also, like, the suicide situation, because, Gemma's like, do you want to get off, we're about to jump, and it's like, he's like, no, I'm exactly where I need to be, which I'm like, oh, so is there going to be, like, a Daniel and Daisy situation? I was like, that's interesting, I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, especially because, like, sadly, the whole, like, her and Deke thing, because obviously he had feelings for her, but it never worked out. But it's like, oh, a man out of time, falling in love with a woman with superpowers, Story literally writes itself. But nevertheless, all that speaking, they end up jumping. Mack immediately gets off the ship, and Deke follows him, but then it turns out like something went down on his ship, and then Deke is like, Mack, we got to get back. The Zephyr ends up, I guess, jumping because maybe the repairs weren't completely fixed, or Mack did something, because like he looked unaffected, so I think he did something before he got off the ship, but it's like, why? How would you know to do something? So that's why I'm like, what is that? So what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? What about Coulson? So many questions. Hopefully we get those answers next episode. I'm curious to see where all of it ends up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.